Good morning, everyone, and welcome to one more Torah study. This week we studied the portion of Pekudei. It's the last portion in the book of Shmot, and I'm starting from selections from Lekutei Sichot, the first talk of the Rebbe on Pekudei. Here is the introduction. Let's start reading, and I'll explain it. We are on page 597. In discussing the verse, it came to pass in the first month, in the second year, on the first day of the month, that the sanctuary was erected. We study it today. It's the fifth Aliyah. Today is Thursday, so I showed that this morning. So the first day of the first month, which is the first of Nisan, the Mishkan was erected. That's the Torah. The Medrash, quoted also by Rashi brings this Medrash, notes that the verse uses the passive voice. It says the sanctuary was erected. It doesn't say Vayakimu et Mishkan. They erected the Mishkan, but it was erected by itself, implying that it arose on its own accord. It was erected, meaning by itself, without help or work by humans. That was the only possibility because no one among the entire Jewish people could erect it because of the weight of the boards that are the walls of the Mishkan. Moshe also could not erect it. The Holy One, blessed be He, told them, act with your hands, you will appear to erect it, but it will arise on its own accord. Even so, I will write that you erected it. As it is written, it came to pass in the first month and in the second year, on the first day of the month, that the sanctuary was erected. Who erected it? Moshe. As it is written, Moshe erected the sanctuary. So the Medrash says that Medrash explained, the Torah says it was erected on its own accord, meaning that it was so heavy that people could not have put it up together. God says to Moshe, don't worry, just put your hand on it and it will lift up. Magic. And it will be placed on its own. Then let's get another one. There were 48 beams. And each one Moshe held, and they were coming up and stood straight into the sockets, and then the wires that came in the middle of the boards to keep them straight and even. Says the Medrash, that's why the Torah says that Moshe erected the Mishkan, because God says to him, you'll get the credit for the little work you do. I'll do the heavy lifting, but you'll get the credit. Clarification is necessary, says the Rebbe. Something is very difficult that we need some help with. The Medrash continues, as also quoted by Rashi. Rashi himself brings it, stating that throughout all the 7 days of the sanctuary's dedication that began on the 23rd of Adar, Moshe would erect the Mishkan, the sanctuary, and take it down every day. If no one, not even Moshe, could erect it because of the weight of the boards, how could Moshe have erected and dismantled it every day in the 8th day of dedication, meaning 7 days before the first of the month? Every day, Moshe erected it and trained Aaron and his sons. At the end of the day, he took it apart. Soon we'll find out. The second day, he repeated. Third day, he again. Fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. 8th day, we read that the Mishkan was erected, that God says to him, it's too difficult for you, I know it, I'll help you, I'll put your hands. Now, we don't understand. He did it for 7 days. It doesn't say that God helped him. It says that he did it himself. Suddenly, on the 8th day, it's unable and no human can do it. But what's going on here? Do you understand the question? Yeah. As explained at length in another source, the reason why Moshe erected the sanctuary on each of the 7 days of the sanctuary's dedication, although God has commanded him, on the day when the first month begins, on the first of the month, you should erect the sanctuary of the tent of meeting, is the subject of a difference of opinion between Rashi and Ramban. You have a question. Ali, the scholar, is asking the question, what for? Why do you need 7 days? And in fact, God does not tell him to do it for 7 days. God told him the first of the month, you should erect the Mishkan. He already erected it on the 23rd of Adar, 7 days earlier, and every day he takes it down, and the next day he puts it up. Takes it down, puts it up next day. Where does God say that to them? There is a dispute between Rashi and Ramban, Nachmanides, about the reason for the earlier 7 days. Ramban writes, God initially told Moshe, that is before the 7 days of dedication of the sanctuary, you shall erect the sanctuary according to its status, as you will be shown on the mountain. Since God explicitly told Moshe, him, that on the first day of Nisan, the sanctuary would be erected to stand for an ongoing period, Moshe knew that he would have to erect and dismantle it during the days of the dedication. The Medrash says, God says to him, on the first of the month, you will do it according to the way you were shown. Says Nachmanides, he knew by himself it had to have been created earlier, because at that day they start, it's the 0 hour where they actually go to serve God. But they need to have training. So we call it Mevin Davar Mitoch Davar. You can get something and understand it based on something else. When God says to them, on the first of the month, it will be erected, and that's when they will serve me, because I'll rest there, he knew that he has to train them. And therefore, how does he train them? By erecting it 7 days earlier, and every day he had to put it down and erect it again the next day. We'll address the idea of why in the middle he had to do, but now in general, that's why there had to be 7 days earlier going out and down. It does not answer how is it possible, because we read that on the first of the month, it was not able to. Yes.
This is what's called a soft opening.
Why?
Soft opening is when you open up.
Okay, soft opening, that's what you call. But here it was training the priest.
Right, which is exactly what you do.
Okay, soft opening. Thank you, Bob.
Yes.
You're taking lessons from Albert.
I appreciate it. Thank you. However, in his commentary to Torah, on the Torah, Rashi does not interpret the intent of the verse as referring to the erection of a sanctuary to stand for an ongoing period. Instead of explaining the verse in a manner that causes it to depart from its straightforward meaning, he understands the phrase, on the day when the first month begins, you shall erect the sanctuary, straightforwardly, not as a specific instruction that on this day the sanctuary will be erected for an ongoing period, but rather as a general command to erect the sanctuary on this day. And therefore, according to this interpretation, the command on the day when the first month begins, you shall erect the sanctuary, is not an additional charge apart from the command, you shall erect the sanctuary, according to its status,
Statutes.
as Ramban explained, but rather it reveals and clarifies the intent of the initial command, that it should be fulfilled on the day when the first month begins, on the first day of the month. So, just a minute, let me summarize. It's, says the Rebbe, if you look at Rashi, you see that Rashi takes it straightforward, meaning God said to them, on the day of the first of the month, first of Nisan, the Mishkan, the tabernacle should be erected, to mean that there was a command to erect it earlier and train, so it's a preparation for the first of the day. So we have a differences of opinions. According to Nachmanides, God told them on the first of the month. God never talked to them about 7 days earlier. He did it on his own volition. According to Rashi, it was included in the command. The command that should be erected, meaning all the preparation must have been taken place earlier, and therefore, for 7 days, you have to erect it and take it down, erect it and take it down, and during the day, you train the Kohanim. Yes, Harry?
It's implying, it's that the new way that you should practice for 7 days, you could practice 2 days before.
It's implying, that's I understand, that's what you're saying. We'll see how the Rebbe takes it and makes a point that it's not implying according to Rashi, but it was a straight command. And let me summarize, I can summarize. The Rebbe says that there are many, many commandments that we know the command based on the action that Moshe did, even though they are not specifically mentioned in the Torah. The Gemara has a list. Rashi brings many cases where God said something to Moshe, but it's very general. How do we know the details that God told Moshe is but by reading how Moshe delivered or how Moshe acted, and then you apply it backwards. And that's the way Rashi goes. Rashi says if Moshe did it, must be that that's included in the command that God gave. You understand that? Rambam disagrees. Ramban, not Rambam. Ramban holds. God says to him on the first of the month should be erected, meaning meaning that when Moshe did it 7 days earlier, it was on his own volition without God's command. Do you understand that, Harry? Where's Bob Simon? According to this interpretation, the command on the day when the first month begins, you should erect the sanctuary, is not an additional charge apart from the command you shall erect the sanctuary, it's according to its statutes, as Ramban explains, but rather it reveals and clarifies the intent of that initial command, that it should be fulfilled on the day when the first month begins, on the first of the month. In other words, as I told you, that reveals that when God said to them on the first of the month, it's part of the command. God told them to train and build it 7 days earlier. And the conclusion would be when the 8th day, he builds it forever. Although Moshe erected the sanctuary before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, he was not commanded to do so. Instead, he concluded that he should do so from the fact that he was commanded to train Aaron and his sons in preparation for the sacrificial services. This training had to be carried out in the place where the services will be performed in an ongoing manner. That is the sanctuary. Specifically, Moshe came to that conclusion based on the explicit command that Aaron and his son should be at the entrance of the tent of meeting throughout the 7 days of the dedication. From that, Moshe knew that he would that he had to erect the sanctuary during those days. Rashi says God did not tell him directly, but God told him that prior to the erection of the Mishkan, he has to train Aaron and his sons. And therefore, and God says that they have to be trained in their place. You cannot move them to a training camp and then bring them there. They have to be training on site. And therefore, he knew that he has to build it and take it apart every day. Based on the above, taking into consideration Rashi's statement quoted above, that neither Moshe nor anyone else could erect the sanctuary on their own, and divine assistance was necessary, a difficulty arises. Now we circle back to the question. According to Ramban, who maintains that there was a special divine command to erect the sanctuary during the 7 days of dedication, it is possible to say, although it could be said that this resolution is somewhat forced, that Moshe was empowered from above to erect it, and this was also implied by the statement that the sanctuary arose on its own accord. However, according to Rashi's understanding, that there was no command to erect a sanctuary during the 7 days of dedication, from where did Moshe derive the strength to erect the sanctuary despite the weight of the boards during these days? So says the Rebbe, maybe I got confused, but let's summarize what the Rebbe says. The Rebbe says that according to Rashi, there was a direct command by God to erect it 7 days earlier. So you can explain, we can answer that when God says to him, on the 8th day, the Mishkan was erected, 8 days, the first of the month, it also applies to earlier days. In other words, it was no big deal. It was a miracle the 8th day. It was a miracle 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Moshe touched it, put it together. Moshe touched it, it went down at the end of the day, then he recreated it. Because it was a direct command from God. According to Nachmanides, there was no such thing, and he did it on his own volition because he understood that that's the right thing to do. If so, where did he get the strength for it? God did not tell him. So we read about the 8th day, which is God's command to erect it, that it was erected by itself because Moshe just touched it. What happened the 6th and the 5th and the 7th and the 4th, 3, 2, 1, that it was erected without God interference? How did Moshe have the power to do that? Yes, Roger.
Yeah, the thing is that, God had commanded Moshe to train the Kohanim with, Aaron and his sons. Why, in this process, it's 7 days of training? Why not 8? Why not 9? Why 7 days?
I think that there is going to be a discussion about number 8, because 7 is 7 days. It's a week. It's a full circle.
Yeah, but why a week, not 2 weeks? You know what I'm saying?
One complete week.
One complete week.
Let me
Yeah,
ask you a question.
it's a full cycle. So every day of the week.
What's the rationale for this group that trains Kohanim now for when the Mashiach is going to come?
If Moshiach comes and God builds a temple,
Yeah.
you need someone to serve God in the
Right,
temple.
you can train them in 7 days, so why do we?
They want to do it before.
But why? I mean. there's no
Why delay it
rationale,
in
there's no basis
7?
here.
Why? I don't understand.
They're
Mashiach
training-
arrives today.
Yeah,
Tomorrow morning, they want to bring a sacrifice.
well, there won't be a Mishkan, there won't be a holy thought, there won't be,
Why?
there won't be a,
God is going to bring it down from heaven, all built.
okay.
So they
You're
want
not
us.
gonna give them 7 days to train?
No, why?
Give
It
7
should-
days here.
No, I don't see this. I don't know that you need 7 days,
Well, if you don't need 7 days, then.
By the way, it's 8 days, but the 8th day he erected it forever
Right.
until the next time they moved.
I
But
just
there was
make-
8 days of training,
I just make it, it only took 7 days for Moshe to train.
8 days,
8 days for Moshe to train the Kohanim.
right?
Well, 7 days he trained him, the 8th day they performed.
They actually
Real.
perform, right,
7 days and the 8th day they performed it.
right.
So now we are starting with training people.
Who put earlier to prepare them for,
It just doesn't seem consistent with what we're doing, that's all.
I don't understand the contradiction, the connection. The Koyanim wants to be prepared, so it shouldn't be foreign to them. At the time of the temple, they used to slaughter, they knew what to slaughter. They knew, because there was nothing else, there was no social media.
Okay,
There was no Amazon shipping, so they have to stand on the computer searching for fans and searching for donuts, etc. There was no such thing. So when Moshe is training them, their mind and heart is focused. Today, their mind and heart is not. So by doing so, you get them closer to the project. To explain the superior dimension of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the 8th day of the dedication, was that on that day the glory of God filled the sanctuary. Right? If you read in the text, in 3 weeks, by the portion of Shmini, on the 8th day, God rested upon the Mishkan, and everybody saw the cloud, the pillar of cloud came down to Oel Moed, to the tent of meeting, to the tabernacle. For the divine presence rested within it. By contrast, during the 7 days of dedication, the divine presence did not rest within it. The first 7 days, there was no godliness. There was only Moshe training the children. We call it, that's why I wasn't excited about soft opening. Soft opening meaning that you have everything intact and you're just training. God wasn't there the first 7 days, that's for sure. By Yom HaShmini, that's a portion of Shmini, is the first time God is resting on the tent of meeting. According to Rashi's understanding, it is clear why the divine presence did not rest in the sanctuary during the 7 days of the dedication. True, the Jews were commanded, they shall make a sanctuary for me and I will dwell among them. That is, that the indwelling of the divine presence was dependent solely on building and erecting the sanctuary. Nevertheless, erecting the sanctuary during the 7 days of dedication was necessary as an element of the training Aaron and his sons were required to undergo, and was not carried out for the sake of erecting the sanctuary in and of itself. According to Rashi, the first 7 days wasn't for God's restings of presence among Jewish people. It's just for the sake of Aaron and his sons, not for God. Therefore, God didn't rest before, because it's nothing to do with God. It has to do with the Koyanim.
What's wrong with the people? Just shortly thereafter.
The eagle they
What's the
did
eagle?
on
What's the
the
eagle?
golden calf they seen on Tisha B'Av. I'm sorry, on the 17th of Tammuz. They're forgiven on Yom Kippur. Immediately the day after Yom Kippur, he told them about the commandment of the building of the tabernacle. It took them 2 days to collect everything. It took them a very few days. I believe within two weeks, they already put together everything. But God said, wait, we're not going to do it in Kislev. Instead, I'll give Kislev another holiday, Hanukkah, many years later. And the first of Nisan is when I will rest. So it put in storage for about 3 years, 3 months. Why? From Kislev, you have Tevet, Shvat, Adar. The first of Nisan, they already did. So it's about 3 months period.
So his forgiveness of the Jews was quick.
Very quick. Well,
Well,
it took 40 days. No, it took 40 days of begging. From Shiva Tammuz. He went back the next day, I think. I'm sorry, he went back on Rosh Chodesh Elul and on Yom Kippur. So for 40 days he begged God, and the Yom Kippur, God says to him, Shalachti kidvarecha, I atone. Let's continue. So says the Rebbe, on the first 7 days of dedicating the temple, God was not resting, because God's resting among the Jews was dependent on creating a dwelling for God. But that dwelling had to be fully ready and prepared with all the men serving in it. Therefore, they needed to do the creation, the training of the priests as part of the erecting the building. Once the 7 days have passed and they were trained properly and the building is all intact, the 8th day God rests. Similar concept apply even according to Ramban's understanding, that Moshe also erected the sanctuary during the 7 days of dedication, because God initially told Moshe, you shall erect the sanctuary according to its statutes, as you will be shown on the mountain. According to Nachmanides, the 7 days of erecting and taking it apart is also God's commandment. We can also explain why God was not resting of the first 7 days. Nevertheless, Ramban explains, the reason why the sanctuary was to be erected during the 7 days of dedication, perhaps that was necessary to train the Levites in its task. That is, erecting it at that time was a detail in the training of the Levites for their future service and was not performed for the sake of the sanctuary itself. Nachmanides, we can also explain, even though God told them, according to Nachmanides, it's included in the command to build it 7 days earlier and take it apart every day to train the Kohanim. We can say that that command was not for God to be resting the first 7 days, but that command was for the purpose of training the Kohanim, regardless of God's presence or not. Only on the 8th day, on the 1st of the month, which is the 1st of Nisan, God says, now I will come down and I will rest among you forever through the Mishkan. Do you understand that? Okay. Alternatively, the intent was to coronate that day, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, with the crown. Meaning, this is Nachmanides, that Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the 1st of Nisan, which is the 8th day of the dedication, would be distinguished by the fact that on it, the sanctuary would be erected for an ongoing period. Thus, the difference between the erection of the sanctuary during the 7 days of dedication and its erection on the 8th day is similar to the difference between the sanctuary, which was temporary dwelling, and the Beit HaMikdash, which was the permanent dwelling, God's permanent dwelling. Therefore, the divine presence did not rest within the sanctuary until the 8th day. The Rebbe says, just like the Holy Temple was permanent, and once that location was chosen, it was forever, became holy, whereas when it comes to the sanctuary, it kept moving, so anytime they camped, it was a temporary location, and then when they moved, the sanctuary moved, same as the 7 days. 7 days was a temporary, that's why I had to take it down every day, because it was a temporary sanctuary for God, and therefore God did not fully rest there. Only on the 8th day, to make it a very special day where we coronated God and brought him down, now it's going to be a permanent presence of God in the Mishkan, even when the Mishkan is moving. Do you understand that?
Kind of hard to have a presence there when the Mishkan is moving. It's all
Right.
individual boards.
But still, there were 42 camps, and every time they stopped, they had to take, every time they moved, they had to take it apart, rebuild it, and God will come back. The cloud of pillar will come back.
That's 30 years. they moved.
They did, except very few. The longest camp was 12 years, so it's not 38 years without moving. The first 2 years, they were the first 2 years, the second year, they were very busy. But the war stopped. They did not stay in one place longer than 12 years. No, not 38 years. The unique distinction of the 8th day and its superiority over the previous 7 days of dedication is expressed in several exceptional aspects associated with that day. As Rashi, basing himself on our sages' statement, comments, the sanctuary was erected on the very day of and that day took 10 crowns. As is self-evident, there had to be a difference in the manner in which a sanctuary was erected on that day when compared with this previous erection. So says the Rebbe, now the Rebbe wants to get back to the question, why suddenly the 8th day Moshe cannot lift it, although he did it the first 7 days. So the Rebbe, the Medrash, and Rashi brings it, that the 8th day, the 1st of Nisan, there were 10 unique features or unique achievements that happened that were unusual and special that didn't happen anytime earlier or after. So the 8th day, even though it's part of the group of the training, the 8th day took another 10 crowns that were unique to that day.
What's a crown?
A crown means it's not even a crown, it's atara. How does he translate it? 10 crowns. Yeah,
What is it?
okay, let me explain it. A wreath. You know what a wreath is? Zer. Atara is between crown and a wreath. In other words, something placed over the head to make it unique. What happens when you go to a birthday party and a child is wearing a wreath? Right? On birthdays, you have wreaths, right? No? In Israel, girls, not boys, but girls, they wear a wreath of flowers.
Yeah.
Flowers made out,
Garland.
huh?
Garland.
A garland? Okay, why? Because we want to know. That's the birthday girl, right?
Yeah.
So that's a crown. In other words, there was something unique that put a peak on top of that day as opposed to the previous or after, the days after.
Something actual, physical.
Spiritual crowns. So we don't say wreaths, but it doesn't say keter. Keter is crown. It says atara. Atara is like the Holy Ark had to have around a,
Like a halo?
not a halo. Anybody seen a picture of the table in the sanctuary that was built in the table had on top? You did not see any, the Holy Ark was a box. What was surrounding the top of the box? It was a little edge like that, many. What do you call them? Ridges, but there is a nice name to it. So you call it crown? It's a molding, crown molding. Yes, that's what I'm referring, I mean, but
And the Purim was outside them.
Purim was in the middle. Let me show it to you. We call it a golden rim. Rim, you see, there is a frame, look at the table, but on top there is something.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
a rim.
Good, yeah.
That's the table. You see that rim?
So what's on top of what's on top of it? What's this?
They
thing?
put the structure to put the showbread, but let's look at the. Same is about the ark. I want to get to the ark. I don't see the ark there. Okay, so it's a crown. There were 10 crowns. 10 crowns means 10 unique spiritual features that happened on that day that made the day, put the day on a pedestal, put him above the other days. So says the Rebbe, as an introduction, A, as is well known, even at that time, many buildings had been erected with large stones, beginning with the buildings of the Tower of Babel, the city and tower whose head would reach the heavens. This was not considered at all out of the ordinary because it was accomplished by many people working together. So Rabbi, let's begin here. We'll start laying the groundwork. There were many buildings were built at the time with huge stones. The Tower of Babel was built, they wanted to reach the heavens. You can't reach it with cinder blocks. You cannot reach it with bricks. They had to have very heavy, large stones and building them one on the top of the other. How do you raise those stones together? How do you make it? You had tons of people. You have 1,000 people. You connected to ropes and they pull, and that's how they lift the stone to where they want it. So the war, even today, as I think I told you, one of the 10 wonders of the universe is the pyramids. They don't know how they did it, but definitely there are huge stones there. Why? Because you have the power of many. Once you have the power of many, everything is accomplishable. Says the Rebbe, it was not at all out of the ordinary, because it was accomplished by many people working together. However, in the present instance, there was a unique requirement as indicated by Rashi's words. No human being could erect it because of the heaviness of the boards, and no human being was strong enough to lift them. Only Moshe was able to erect it. Moreover, even Moshe only appeared to be erecting it. So says the Rebbe, what's unique about the Mishkan? They were not allowed to work on it together, a bunch of people, but only one man. Rashi's wording is precise. By saying no human being, he implies no single person. That is, on the 8th day, the sanctuary had to be erected by one person alone, Moshe. By contrast, during the 7 days of dedication, the sanctuary was erected by many people together. True, we do not find an explicit command that the first time the sanctuary was erected in a permanent manner, it had to be erected by only one person. However, often we know about divine commands only from the fact that this was the way the action in question was actually performed. So it doesn't say explicitly in the Torah that no more than one man can do it. But by looking at the outcome, at the actual behavior, at the actual work, you can tell that that's the way God wanted it. So therefore, now we can accommodate the answer. The first 7 days, they had a lot of people helping to do it. Comes the 8th day, Moshe alone couldn't do it, meaning from here you deduce that God told Moshe only one man can do it, only you. But one human being, no matter how strong and mighty, cannot do it. And God says to him, put your fingers, it will come out. In other words, he wanted the full credit to be billed to Moshe. And as a human being, one human being, it's impossible. So the fact that the Tower of Babel and the pyramids were built is because many people. So the 7 days, now it's not in question. Many people did it. But the 8th day is only Moshe, and that's where it was difficult. That's why it says, the Torah says, Hukam Mishkan, it was erected. Moshe got credit. Moshe put his fingers and God did it. Indeed, in these Torah readings, there are many details regarding the construction of the sanctuary for which no explicit command is found. Says the Rebbe, you can see a lot more details that Moshe did that were very specific. You don't find that God had commanded them, but by the action of Moshe, you are able to learn that that's what God wanted. Moreover, there are some instances in which the actual practice appeared to contradict the command that was given regarding it. As Rashi states regarding the strands that held the tzitz, the word tzitz, there was one of the 8 garments of the high priest. Additionally, it raised a question regarding the matter here, that is, regarding the manner in which the tzitz was actually made. For the text states, And with regards to the command, it states differently. In other words, Rashi himself, regarding the tzitz was like a bandana that the high priest wore, and it has strands to hold it, two on top, two on the bottom edge, and then there were two coming out this way. But in the text, the way the command was given is totally different than the way the Torah describes how they actually did it. And Rashi says there's a contradiction. So must be when God wanted it or told Moshe, he told them the way they actually did it, even though it contradicts. And that requires clarification, but that's not the issue. The issue is there are commands that are mentioned in the Torah in one way, and the same fulfillment of that command is stated in the Torah that was not totally different. And must be that the actual doing is the way God told Moshe.
So why put it Torah the wrong way?
Oh, that's a good question. For that, we need a full day. Moreover, it could be said that there was a specific command for the sanctuary to be erected initially by one person, as it is written, you, the singular form is used, ve'ata shall erect the sanctuary according to its statutes, as you, that is, Moshe alone, will be shown on the mountain. As explained above, according to Rashi, that verse applies to the erection of the sanctuary on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and therefore, up to that point, they can do it with a bunch of people. But on the 8th day, there were 10 crowns. What was one of the 10 crowns? That one person do it and not many people. Indeed, it could be said that this is implied by the precise wording that Rashi, in his commentary to that verse, Rashi comments, for in the future, I, the singular form is used, will teach you and show you the order of its erection. The straightforward interpretation of Rashi's words are that God, as it were, would show Moshe how to erect the sanctuary by erecting it and showing him the manner in which it should be done. God acts alone. Obviously, he does not need the assistance of others, and therefore God is going to show Moshe how to do it. And Rashi uses the word,
God showed Moshe everything beforehand visually. You should know what it's supposed to do.
right. Rashi uses the word seder, order, which is translated as matter, because seder does not imply only the order in which the events took place, but also the particular details of the practice, the matter. This classic example is the seder of the Haggadah or the like. That's why we do the seder and the Passover, because every detail must follow the 15 steps. They must follow exactly in order. This or the like, in which instance there are many details involved that are to be followed precisely. This is self-evident. Thus, the implication is that Moshe was to erect the sanctuary in keeping with the matter that God erected alone. So therefore, when God showed Moshe, he says, I will show you Asher Atam Arebar, as I showed you, as I do in a mountain. I did it myself. You have to do it yourself. But that applies to the 8th day, even though there is no specific command. Must be that that's what God wanted. And the first 7 days, they can have a bunch of people helping. Let me give you a summary. There is two ways in which we have a relationship, us and God. One is called itaruta deletata, awakening from below. We reach out to God. A second one is called itaruta delela. God is reaching down to us. On Mount Sinai, God came down to us. It didn't last because we did not put an effort. We did not invest. So therefore, it was temporary. But what happens when we build the Mishkan, we get involved, we invest, now it's going to be lasting because we have skin in the game. I spoke about it in great details. Says the Rebbe, that's exactly what's going on in this between Rashi and Nachmanides. According to Rashi, the most important is that the sanctuary to be a dwelling for God. Nobody can create a dwelling for God. And therefore, it had to come directly from God's instruction, including the training in the 7 days, even though they're not mentioned. Because according to Rashi, this is the most important part. According to Nachmanides, the purpose of the sanctuary is to connect to God. How do you connect to God? On your own volition, you put the effort, you put the investment. Therefore, the first 7 days, the introduction to God coming down must have come from the human, and therefore God did not command. They understood it themselves. Only then you create the connection and God comes down. Why is it important, says the Rebbe? The question is, no, and then the Rebbe goes on to say the second part, and that is the final connection, regardless if the first is Sarasota delatata, is the human effort or God's effort, the final connection is established only through the Holy Tzaddik. Only Moshe can erect it on the 8th day. That's very unusual, because if it was 7 days, a bunch of people did it, what's wrong with the 8th day doing the same way? After all, the investment of the human. Or if God commanded, let them all involved. The Torah makes it very clear, Moshe couldn't do it himself, meaning Moshe is the only one who can do it. Because if you want to know the channel to create, you can do the motions, you can follow the instructions, but the actual power does not enter into the human being, to the Jewish people, unless Moshe is the one who connects between us. And that's why the 8th day, which is unique from the previous 7 and the start for the rest of the history of Jewish people, had to have been created through Moshe. Moshe is the one who had to build it, and now we have difficulty how Moshe by himself can do it, and that's why we need to know that God says to him, don't worry, you put your effort, and it will happen, and you still get the full credit for it. And that's the conclusion of our point for this week.
Thank you,
Thank you
Rabbi.
so much.